So now we will have a Bhagavatam Katha, Bhagavad lecture. But before we will sing a very famous song, Jaya Radha Madhava, by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And if you need the words, we have songbooks there. In page number 10, the song is there, Jaya Radha Madhava. But it's very easy, simple words. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tera Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasvatim Vyasa Tato Jayamudhirayet. So before reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, we offer our obeisances to Narayana Rishi, the best human being, the Lord, the goddess Sarasvati, and also Vedavyas, the compiler of this book. Everybody speaks English? English. Und Rosmarie übersetzt für Kishori Kunde, da? Willst du dich dazusetzen? Madeleine braucht auch Übersetzung, genau. Genau, also Rosmarie ist unsere Dolmetscherin heute. Vielen Dank. Oder vielleicht willst du Subal noch für Parampurusha machen? Ja? Oder geht's Englisch? Geht, er meint, er geht. Wenn es nicht geht, schmeißen ein Körnchen auf das Schild. So we're reading today from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 4, 27, no? 24. 4, 4, 24. 4, 4, 24. So the name of this chapter is Sati Quits Her Body. And the verse is spoken by Maitreya. Please repeat. Maitreya Uvacham Iti Advare Daksham Anudhyam Shatruhan Kshito Udichim Nishasada Shantavak Prishtva Jalam Pitam Dukulam Sambritam Nimilya Drik Yogapatam Samavishat Maitreya Vacham Iti Advare Dakshang Anudya Shatruhan Kshitva Udichim Nishada Shantavak Shpritva Jalam Pita Dukula Sambritam Nimilya Drik Yogapatam Samavishat Maitreya Vacha Iti Advare Daksham Anudya Shatruhan Kshito Udiching Nishanda Shantavak Spritva Jalam Pita Dukula Sambritam Nimilya Drig Yogapatam Samavishan Maitreya Vacham Maitreya Vacha Iti Advari Daksham Anudya Shatruhan Chita Udichin Nishada Shantavak Spritva Jalam Pita Dukula Sambrita Nimilya Drigyoga Patam Samabhishant. Ladies. Yovacha Iti Advare Daksham Anudya Shatruhan Kshita Udichin Nishada Shantavak Spritva Jalam Pita Dukula Sambrita Nimilya Drigyoga Patang Samavishat. Please repeat the word. Somebody else? Willst du auch? Okay. Maitreya Vacha Iti Advare Daksham Anudya Shatruhan Jalam Pita Dukula Sambrita Nimilya Drigyoga Patang Samavishat. Maitreya Vacha Iti Advare Daksham Anudya Shatruhan Kshita Udichim Nishada Shantavak Spritva Jalam Pita Dukula Sambrita Nimilya Drik Yoga Patang Samavishat. Thank you very much. So please repeat word by word translation. Maitreya Vacha. Maitreya said, Iti, thus, Advare, in the arena of sacrifice, Daksham, to Daksha, Anudhya, speaking, Shatruhan, O annihilator of enemies, Kshito, on the ground, Udichim, facing north, Nishada, sat down, Shantavak, in silence, Spritva, after touching, Jalam, water, Pita Dukula Sambrita, dressed in yellow garments, Nimilya, clothing, Drik, division, Yoga Patam, the mystic yoga process, Samavishat, became absorbed. Translation on purpose by Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Maitreya, the sage, told Vidura, O annihilator of enemies, while thus speaking to her father in the arena of sacrifice, Sati sat down on the ground and faced north. Dressed in saffron garments, she sanctified herself with water and closed her eyes to absorb herself in the process of mystic yoga. Purport. It is said that when a man desires to quit his body, he dresses in saffron garments. Therefore, it appears that Sati changed her dress, indicating that she was going to quit her body given by Daksha. Daksha was Sati's father, so instead of killing Daksha, she decided that it would be better to destroy the part of his body which was hers. Thus, she decided to give up the body of Daksha by the yogic process. Sati was the wife of Lord Shiva, who is known as Yogeshwara, the best among all yogis. Because he knows all the mystic processes of yoga, so it appears that Sati also knew them. Either she learned yoga from her husband, or she was enlightened because she was the daughter of such a great king as Daksha. The perfection of yoga is that one can give up one's body or release oneself from the embodiment of material elements according to one's desire. Yogis who have attained perfection are not subject to death by natural laws. Such perfect yogis can leave the body whenever they desire. Generally, the yogi first of all becomes mature in controlling the air passing within the body, thus bringing the soul to the top of the brain. Then when the body bursts into flames, the yogi can go anywhere he likes. This yoga system recognizes the soul, and thus it is distinct from the so-called yoga process for controlling the cells of the body, which has been discovered in the modern age. The real yoga process accepts the transmigration of the soul from one planet to another, or one body to another, and it appears from this incident that Sati wanted to transfer her soul to another body or sphere. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shriyuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopipakanta Radhakanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matergati Matsarvasva Padambujo Radhamadana Mohanao Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadru Mada Srimad Radangara Simhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Deva Uprishthalivi Savyamano Smarami Srimanra Sarasaramvi Vamsiva Tatatastitaha Karsham Venu Svanai Gopir Gopinata Shriyastunaha Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll read the verse one more time. Maitreya vacha iti advaridaksham anudya shatruhan kshito udiching nishada shantavak Shpritva jalam pita dukula samvritani milyadrig yoga patam samavishat. Maitreya, the sage, told Vidura, O annihilator of enemies, while thus speaking to her father in the arena of sacrifice, Sati sat down on the ground and faced north. Dressed in saffron garments, she sanctified herself with water and closed her eyes to absorb herself in the process of mystic yoga. Hare Krishna. So this is a very crucial part in this entire story. In the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are quite a few really amazing stories, and the first epic story that is told is the story of Daksha, and how Daksha insulted Shiva. In ignorance, he insulted Shiva because he thought of Shiva as in family relationships. He was thinking, he's my son-in-law, so he should respect me. And he was ignorant of his, spiritual or transcendental position. So he made the great mistake to feel offended when Shiva did not stand up when he entered the assembly hall. And then a whole sequence of cursing and counter-cursing occurred. The followers of Shiva and the followers of Daksha were cursing each other. And nowadays people also curse, and it's considered to be not something good to do, to curse, but it has no effect. But when qualified people speak a curse, it actually has an effect. It can have an effect. When people who have tejas, tejas means power, energy, any word they speak will come true. So if somebody curses you, says, sends a negative curse towards you, you are in trouble. So curses are taken very seriously if they are spoken by qualified people, because you can be sure this curse will come true. So it was very heavy. This is, you could say, a very, in one sense, a sophisticated way of fighting also. Instead of straight away, you see sometimes in the parliament, first they throw documents at each other, and then they throw other objects at each other, and sometimes they start fighting also in the parliaments, when it gets uncivilized. In this assembly, they were cursing each other, and it has an effect. So there were real curses that will have an effect on the recipient of those curses. So it was a very heated situation, and Lord Shiva hadn't even noticed that all of this had happened. He was just sitting in meditation, and when he noticed, he just stood up and walked out. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. But it still affected his situation, because when later Sati, this was the previous chapters, she saw how so many people, so many devatas and so many people were going to a big ceremony organized by her father. So she was very eager to also join, and she proposed to Shiva, we should also go. And Shiva said, probably not a good idea. We didn't receive an invitation. And she said, you can always go to the home of your father. You don't need an invitation. It's natural to go home. But Shiva still, advised her not to go. But at one point, she just, she was thinking, it's described, she was walking up and down, indecisive. Should I follow my husband or should I follow my instinct? So she decided to follow her instinct, and she just went. She just went, and all the Shiva Ganas, which are a sight to behold, the Shiva Ganas are a sight to behold. They are scary, impressive, colorful, So all the Shiva Ganas, they followed Sati, to the arena of Daksha, and when she arrived, Daksha ignored her. Everybody welcomed her, except her father. He ignored her, and so she was obviously very hurt. But actually, she was more hurt because she realized that her father still did not understand the position of Shiva. So in the few previous verses here, Sati was saying, "I don't want the body you have given me." So I don't want this body, because bodily connections are ultimately always temporary, and sometimes we get too attached to bodily connections, family or nationality also. In the Vedas it's clearly stated, if you think that the place of your birth is sacred, you're no better than an ass. So it's a heavy statement for nationalists. But ultimately it's true. We should not be too attached to our place of birth or body. Singari Bhagavan ki jai. Wait a few more seconds. Hare Krishna, jai. So the body connection that we have is temporary, and in this case, Sati is clearly, you could say, rejecting, renouncing her connection to Daksha. So in the previous verse, she said, "My body, which is just like a bag, has been produced by you. I shall therefore give it up." And this body is contaminated by the relationship with a person who is an offender. So that was her realization, that Daksha was very proud, was rejecting her because of her husband. And of course we should talk shortly at least about Shiva and why sometimes people misunderstand him. So Shiva, according to the Srimad Bhagavatam, is the greatest among Vaishnavas. So the very famous verse, Vaishnavanam yata Shambhu. So among all the Vaishnavas or worshippers of Vishnu, Shiva is the foremost. And therefore he is, repeatedly respected and addressed in the Bhagavatam. And when Shiva speaks, you will see it says Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. So he is the same term that it is used to depict Krishna is also used to depict Shiva. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. And this is also used in connection to Narada Muni, for example. Great sages, also it says Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. So Bhagavan, the word Bhagavan means somebody who has all qualities in perfection. Bhagavan. So Bhagavan, so there are Sat Aishvarya Purnas, 6 qualities that are opulences, or 6 opulences. If one has them, one is attractive. So the first one is beauty. Beauty. Somebody is beautiful, they're attractive, naturally. Then another quality is intelligence. So if somebody is beautiful, but maybe not intelligent, then she might become less attractive. I remember when I was in school still, there were some, in the news, I forgot, there was some very famous model, and she was carrying fur. Fur means from an animal, from a very protected species, an animal you should not kill, And she was interviewed about it, and she had no idea what she was carrying, She was just concerned that it's a, expensive brand, and then all her fame went down the drain very quickly. So she was beautiful, but not very intelligent, So you have intelligence, you're very attractive, So there are many people who might not be physically very beautiful, but if they are intelligent, they are attractive. So, and then what else? Wealth, wealth. If you're wealthy, you are attractive. Even if the person might be, a crook, still somehow the person is famous just because of their wealth, or power also. A politician is there, let's say the president of America, and maybe you don't like America, maybe you don't like the political party he belongs to, but if he comes, you will become excited because he's the president of America. What else is there? Renunciation. So this is sometimes not obvious for everyone, but somebody who is independent. Renunciation means independence. You're not dependent on anything. It's a very, very crucial quality to be renounced. If somebody is able to live very simply and happy, that's astonishing. Because most people need so many things to be happy or to feel secure or safe. So if somebody is, able to be, live very simply, take risks, and live in the forest, people admire it. So renunciation. So did we miss something? Intelligence, power, we said. Fame, we missed fame. Yeah. So these are the Sat Aishvarya Purnas, the 6 opulences, and to some extent we will have them, more or less. And the more of them you have, the more powerful, popular, and happy also you will be. But Bhagavan means the person or a person who has all of these 6 opulences in full. All of these 6 opulences in full. So Shiva is addressed as Bhagavan. So that means he is, all intelligent, all powerful, all famous, and also especially he's renounced. Even he's very wealthy. If you hear the opulence of Mount Kailash, he's very wealthy. But he's very renounced. It's very clear. But because he's renounced, Some people get confused. I saw some years ago, people were sharing on Facebook this meme, which was very deep, I thought. It was a picture of a yogi, with long dreads, long braided hair, just like Shiva, She was described to have, matted locks, and, dressed very simply. So you could easily think that this person, living in the forest, this yogi, is not very civilized. You could think that, because he's living in the forest. He's not. He doesn't have a house. He doesn't have a car. So it's not very civilized. But the question is, where is the sophistication? So we can have sophistication in amenities that we have, or sophistication of the mind. So sophistication of the mind, of course, is much more valuable. And you will regularly find that people who have a very sophisticated life, at one point they realize it's not pleasing me, it's not giving me everything I need, and then they renounced. So in Indian history, in the Bhagavatam, there are plenty of stories of very successful, powerful people, kings, businessmen, who at one point decided to renounce everything and live very simply. So in our tradition, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan are the best example. They were actually ministers and clerks in the government of the Sultanate of Bengal. So they were very powerful. Technically, they were running the state, while Saddam Hussein Shah, the Shah, was conquering. And they were running everything, all the state affairs. So they were very, very powerful. But at one point, they rejected this position and became the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and were living in Vrindavan, every night under a different tree. So from living in palaces to living every night under a different tree. So this might seem very unsophisticated and primitive. But the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, they produced the biggest amount of Sanskrit literature in the Middle Ages. Jiva Goswami by himself composed over 1 million Sanskrit verses. So very sophisticated. So we should not be confused, when somebody is, or one should look twice, let's say, because actually tamaguna, or ignorance, and sattvaguna sometimes can be confused. They seem similar, Somebody is sleeping and somebody is meditating, Big difference, But it might externally look the same. So in a very similar way, somebody who's very detached, who's living a very simple life, voluntarily, taking these hardships, might be a very elevated person, So Shiva, for example, has matted locks, is smearing his body with ashes, And sometimes when you see, people who have a mental disease, and nobody's taking care of them, they look the same. They also, their hairs, get matted, They're running around like crazy, They're dirty, So on first sight, it might look the same, but there's a huge difference, huge difference. If somebody voluntarily is taking these austerities, or somebody is, induced by ignorance, trapped in that condition. So yes, because Shiva had this appearance, Daksha was not so happy, He was, very much, you could say, the symbol of a materialistic father-in-law, who would like his daughter to be married to, a very wealthy, successful, business owner, or, very, good earning. And he didn't realize of the actual qualities of Shiva. Shiva is Bhagavan, so he has all qualities, but in Shiva, austerity is very predominant. Austerity is very predominant, and therefore Daksha got confused. So here Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport that either Sati knew the process of yoga because her husband is Yogeshvara, the greatest of the yogis, or maybe also because she was of royal family. Usually royal families, they got the same training as Brahminical families. The only difference is that Brahminical families traditionally remain in a very traditional, you could say, simple lifestyle, while royals enter into contact with passion, with violence, with diplomacy, with money, with fighting also, of course. So either of those two, Sati was completely conversant and expert in yoga, just like her husband. And that means that also she had a very qualified understanding of reality. So she immediately, when she saw her father disrespecting Shiva, through disrespecting or ignoring her, a very passive-aggressive way. Sometimes passive aggressiveness is the worst aggression, and we tend to do that also sometimes. Like, for example, when you go on book distribution in the German-speaking world, between Vienna and Hamburg and Zurich, the most difficult place for me to distribute books has always been Vienna, because the people from Vienna, they are very proud, and because they're very proud, when they see somebody, approaching them, in most places people say, "I have no time," That's the mantra of the modern age. We have no time. Early in the morning, you still find people who are a little bit more relaxed, but as the day progresses, people have no time. That's their main mantra. But in Vienna, they don't even talk to you. They just ignore you. That's more painful, actually, than when somebody rejects you and you approach them. Then at least you were rejected. But to be ignored is more painful. So that's passive aggression. It's called passive aggression. It's like, I didn't do anything. Oh yes, you did something. You know very well you did it, and you feel it still. So passive aggressiveness is can be very hurtful. And if we don't control our minds and our emotions, we might be doing it to our the people surrounding us. We just ignore them. And sometimes it's very light, sometimes it's more intense, but in any case, it will leave a trace. So Sati immediately understood, the mood of her father, and therefore decided to reject the body she had been given by him. So that's a very powerful, decision, and because she is expert in yoga, it says here, yoga patam samavishat, So she became absorbed in yoga because the ultimate goal of yoga is to transcend the material body. So we have this material body which is made of material elements. So this was the whole topic of the previous canto. There Kapila Muni describes Sankhya Yoga. And in Sankhya Yoga, one understands the nature of this world, the nature of this body, the nature of our psychology, elementally and hierarchically, and we understand how the evolution of material bondage occurs. So basically, in great detail in Sankhya Yoga, first of all, you understand what are the elements of this world, beginning with earth, fire, water, ether, air, ether, and then mind, intelligence, ego, then the senses. There's not only 5 senses, but there are 10 senses. There are 5 knowledge-acquiring senses and 5 working senses. The working senses sometimes are not so well known, but basically the working senses are senses that are actively engaged in this world, and they're considered to be the arms and hands, the legs, the tongue, which has a double capacity. It has the capacity of speech as a working sense, and the capacity of taste as a knowledge-acquiring sense. And what else? And then the genitals and the organs of excretion. So these are the working senses. These 10 senses combined with the 8 elements make up our current situation in this world. So in Sankhya Yoga, this is examined in great detail, how they are correlated, which element is connected with each sense, how the senses become more and the elements become more subtle, etc., etc. It's a big topic, but basically you have a very clear understanding of how you have been embodied in this world. So once you understand how you are embodied in this world, the idea of Sankhya Yoga is to undo the process, to rewind the process. So technically it's described, you merge the earth element into the water, in meditation, the water into the fire into the air into the ether into the mind, and so on. So you basically retrieve, from this material conditioning. And in very practical terms, that means sense control. So you are able to control the senses because you understand how they work very clearly. So because you understand how they work, you cannot be tricked by them. So this in the very beginning of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, that's the definition of somebody who is not practicing yoga. We are conditioned to follow the dictations of the mind. We just think it's real. We think it's me. So it's very powerful. Whenever you have a sensation, a desire, a thought, an emotion, if you're not in control, you think it's me. I am hungry. I have to eat now. I am angry. I have to scream now, etc. It's very powerful because we identify any sensation and feeling of the senses and the mind to be us. Whereas the more you are practiced in yoga, you understand that actually you are the observer. You are the person, who has this body. And it's up to you to decide what actually should be done or what actually happens. So you could say in general, education, any form of education will teach you that. Like in the beginning, in the playground, you will see the ego is very blunt, no masks, no covering, no politeness. There's two children and they both identify an object they like, and their immediate reaction is, this is mine. So the false ego says, me and mine. This is the false ego, aham mameti. So then those two children, they grab the toy and they're screaming and pulling. Mine, 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 me, mine. So then the parents come, and tell them, no, it's not yours. Belongs to this other person. So a little bit they understand then, okay, then I have to be, I have to ask if I want something, can I have it please, something like that. So little by little we learn to not be so egoistic, But in our core, this egoistic mentality remains, The only thing that changes is we are a little bit more educated and refined about how we express our egos, In the beginning we are very direct, And sometimes it still happens, People steal or people attack another country, The ego becomes very blunt. So, to learn how to be the real ego. Because ahankara is translated in different ways, but the way in the Bhakti tradition, Srila Prabhupada translates ahankara as false ego. So if we say false ego, that indicates that there must be real ego. So the Atma, the self, is the real ego. In some traditions, in some philosophical traditions, the idea is to destroy the ego. Because the ego is so selfish, sometimes the sensation and feeling is we have to just empty ourselves and completely dissolve, destroy the ego. Especially in nihilistic or Buddhist traditions, this is very prominent. And when I was a brahmachari in Berlin, I remember there were these Buddhists who were graffiti artists, and they were painting the whole city, kill ego. Kill ego, kill ego, kill ego, kill ego. But this is not our philosophy. Because in the Bhakti tradition, Bhakti means love and devotion. So if you kill the ego, you also kill the Bhakti. We don't want to kill Bhakti. Bhakti is real. So there is real ego. The Atma is Satchidananda. It's eternal. It's full of conscious. It's full of bliss. What we want to overcome is the materialistic ego, which is exactly the opposite. It's Nirananda. It experiences a lot of suffering. It is Achit. It is ignorant, unconscious. And also, it is Asat. It is temporary. It's always changing. One day you identify as a Christian, next day you identify as a Muslim, next day, whatever, or this football club or this football club, or, from birth to birth also. There are many stories of past life memories of people, many of them proven. I always forget the name of this author, but Akila has this book from a researcher or professor who wanted to disprove that reincarnation is true because he heard about some stories. Yeah, Elin Stevenson. So he wanted to, document the supposed cases of reincarnation because he wanted to prove them wrong. So he traveled to India, where some of these cases were, being reported, and in the case of trying to proving them wrong, he was proved wrong. So he still wrote the book, but showing how it was true. So it's a very interesting book, and there are many people in these past life regressions where you see that very often you are born. Very often people are born in their enemy's camp in the next birth, because whatever you meditate, in the Bhagavad Gita is clearly stated, whatever state of consciousness you have at the moment of death, that's where you're going, So, Palestinians will be born in Israel, Israelis will be born in Palestina, Pakistanis will be born in India, Indians are born in Pakistan, So the soul is independent, of our birthplace. We should be very conscious, what we meditate. If we hate something, hate is an equal attachment. Hate and attachment are two sides of the same coin. They're called raga, dvesha. Excessive attachment to something is just around the corner for excessive hate. Especially the relationship between India and Pakistan, because basically they're one people, but because of political separations, religious fault lines, but they're so close that they hate each other even more. If it was somebody else you don't know, who cares, But they're so close, the raga is so strong that the dvesha is accordingly stronger. So raga, dvesha will always be there in the material world. They interchange each other. There's the love story, and then comes the hate story afterwards, very often. So now I lost my red thread I was trying to follow. What was the point I was saying before that? Yeah, so reincarnation, yes. So we should be careful what kind of consciousness we cultivate, because that is going to determine, where you will end up ultimately. Ahankar, yes, ahankar also we were talking. So yes, the false ego and the Atma. The Atma is the true self. This is the person which is beyond the ahankar. And the ahankar, everything it's doing is just projecting reality and identity outwards. So this is called Bahiranga. Bahiranga Shakti, the external energy of the Lord, Maya Shakti, actually is Sati Devi herself. Sati is Prakriti Devi. She's the external material energy of the Lord, Maya Shakti. And she's very powerful. She's very powerful. And she herself is practicing yoga and detaching from this world. So maybe we should also. And this is actually the beginning of the Bhagavat Purana. Begins with the story of Vyasadev, who has compiled all the Vedic texts, so many agamas, so many Vedas and Upavedas and Upanishads, describing, all aspects of life, so many hymns for different devatas, for different purposes, for different rituals, everything, so much. But in the beginning of the Bhagavat, Vyasadeva is actually not so happy. He's depressed, He's not fulfilled. He has the feeling something is missing, So this is the beginning of the Bhagavatam. And in this confusion, the spiritual master of Vyasadeva, Narada Muni, appears, and enlightens him by giving him a vision. So, and the vision that Vyasadeva sees is he sees the entire world panged, or you could say suffering under the three forms of suffering. There are three forms of suffering. Sufferings from the body and mind, sufferings caused by other living entities, and suffering caused by nature, like heat or cold or rain, etc. So he sees how the entire population of this world is suffering. Humans as well as animals, everybody's suffering. There is a fight. It's the fight of survival. Everybody's suffering in samsara. So the samsara is the cycle of birth and death. It's very wonderful, but it's also very painful. So he sees that, and then he sees that Maya Shakti or Sati Devi, she, who is the controller, Durga Devi, as Durga, it's described she has 10 arms, and these 10 arms represent the 10 directions. Like around the temple here, we have the Dikpalas. In each direction, we have a Bali Pitam. You might have seen this traditional South Indian offering altars, and under this Bali Pitam, there is a yantra of a Dikpala installed. So we have Agni there, we have Yama there, we have Niritti there, we have Varuna there, we have Vayu, Kuvera, Indra, and Shiva as the Dikpalas. And then there's also upward and downward, in the Brahmastan. So these 10 directions are controlled by Durga Devi. You cannot escape. Durga also means fortress or prison, depending which side of the wall you are, or how the wall is used. So Durga Devi is controlling this fortress, and we cannot really escape. So, and not only that, she has a trident. She has a trident, and this trident represents the three tapas. Three forms of suffering I just mentioned. Adibhautika klesha, Adhyatmika klesha, Adidaivika klesha. Sufferings from the body, external living entities, and also nature. So he sees how this, the entire population of this world is trying to control this energy, this material energy, but we are failing. We are too small, we are impotent, but it's still attempting to control this world, The false ego, ahankara, is trying to lord it over, Prabhupada sometimes says, to lord over everything. And they're suffering, and then he sees that this same Shakti, Durga Devi, is offering prayers to Vishnu. So then he has this very clear realization. If Durga Devi herself, material energy personified, is offering prayers to Vishnu, that's the solution for all living entities. If they do the same, they are in harmony with nature, you could say. So this is the beginning of the Bhagavat Purana, where then Narada Muni instructs Vyasadeva, in this book, you should not include anything material or external. Because even in the Bhagavad Gita, actually, interestingly, Krishna warns about the study of the Vedas. He says, don't hear the words of the Vedas, which are flowery, and are predominantly made out of the three modes of nature. So that means in the Vedas you will find a promise for health, or you do this ritual and you will become very wealthy and powerful and victorious over your enemies, something like that, which might be useful, but it's not the ultimate goal of the Vedas. The ultimate goal of the Vedas you will find in Vedanta. In Vedanta, the meaning and purport and direction of the Vedas, philosophically, spiritually, is extracted and condensed, which most people can't understand. And the Bhagavad Purana is then the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra by Vyasadeva himself. So therefore the Bhagavatam begins with the same word, Janmadyasya Yatha. So the same words that begin the Vedanta Sutra also begin the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is of course a Purana, Bhagavad Purana, and it's very easily accessible. That's the idea of the Puranas. The Puranas are like, nowadays everybody watches television or YouTube, and nowadays probably 90% of the people, the information they get is from YouTube, or Wikipedia, if they're a little bit more, if they're studying, they're trying to find something in Wikipedia. But the point is that when you watch something, a video, it's very easy to follow. If you read something, you need to be a little bit more concentrated. You really have to focus, read. So most people don't have the ability, patience, time to actually sit down and study all the Veda Shastras. So the Puranas are stories that enlighten and educate people. So there are different Puranas for different modes of nature, picking people up at different stages of life. And the Bhagavad Purana is the Purana, sometimes described as the ripe fruit on the tree of the Vedas, which is the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So in the essence of the Vedas, there is a commentary which is much more accessible. So the Vedanta Sutras, some of you might know, for example, Anandamaya Vyasat or Aham Brahmasmi, many famous sutras like this, which have a very deep meaning, and in just 3 words you can understand so much. But maybe you still don't understand exactly what you should do or how you should do it. And therefore the Bhagavatam is considered to be, you could say, a life manual in many ways. So you have many examples of people who actually achieved perfection, but also sometimes people or devotees who had tribulations and difficulties. Like for example Indra. Indra, who is in the Vedas always glorified. In the Bhagavad Purana sometimes, or quite a few times, he makes quite a lot of mistakes. The biggest mistake he made was to try to inundate Gokula with rain. And then Krishna lifted the Govardhan hill. So the 9 cantos of the Bhagavatam actually are, you could say, a preparation, culturally, philosophically. So many different aspects, are talked. And then when you reach the 10th canto, then you have reached the face, the smiling face of the Bhagavatam, which is the Krishna Lila. This is the culmination of the Bhagavad Purana. So right now we are in the 4th canto, and we are hearing of the story of Daksha. Very important point, to not be arrogant, to not commit offenses. Daksha was actually a very powerful person. He was a Prajapati, means he was a progenitor. He was endowed with power and position to populate the universe. So he was an extremely powerful person, very attractive, very wealthy, very influential, very respected, and he made a huge mistake. If you know the story, I'll do a, what do you call it? Spoiler alert. At the end, Daksha had the head of a goat. That was the, heavy price he had to pay, for his offenses. So, but the main point that I want to finish now, discussing the last minutes, before we ask some questions, if you have some questions, you can think of something now already, is that Sati, she dressed herself in yellow or saffron cloth, So saffron is the color of detachment. So you will see there are some brahmacharis here. It's a very powerful color actually. It carries a lot of responsibility, because this color means that you have detached from this world. Technically, the color means I am dead to this world. It also signifies the fire of renunciation. So it's a very powerful color. And it's also used to, of course, to wrap the corpses, of deceased people. They're also wrapped in orange colors. And traditionally, the renounced people, like Shiva, they used to go to the crematorium and just take whatever, ashes or orange cloth they could find there, and then dress themselves like that, So that's the meaning. So nowadays, we don't get it from the crematorium. We buy it from the Loy Bazaar in Vrindavan. But the color meaning is still there, It's a big responsibility. And it means detachment. So Sati touched fire. She dressed herself in orange cloth, So vastram is very important, when you do puja, to have, a different form of garment. It makes a difference. Sometimes people don't understand or say, it's all the same, Western cloth, Indian cloth, what's the difference, But actually, it changes your consciousness, The way you're dressed, it has an effect on your consciousness, 100%, That's why many people, of course, many young people have different fashions, I'm a punker, I'm a hippie, I'm a whatever, emo, I'm a, skater, hip-hopper, and you have your special dress, So in a similar way, there is a dress for renunciation, or a dress, if you wear the dress, you behave and you feel different, I remember one time I was in Berlin in the temple, and we had to go to a program, and there was no space in the car, so I had to go by bike, So I changed from my dhoti into shorts and t-shirt, and then my bike, when I was a young kid, I was doing a lot of biking, my bike consciousness came back, And I was, jumping over all the railings and trying to be as fast as the car. And then we arrived, Karamakana Maharaj said, oh, you're a really good biker, I didn't know. But, if I was wearing a dhoti, I wouldn't have been riding the same way, So it makes a difference. So Sati changed her dress, and then she touched water. Very important, So in the altar, you will see when you do a ceremony, a ritual, we have water from the 7 holy rivers of India, Ganga, Cha, Yamuna, Godavari, Saraswati, Narmada, Sindhu, Jalismi, Sanidim, Kuru. So these are the 7 holy rivers of India. And we invoke these holy rivers into the water by mantra. Mantra has a very powerful effect on nature and especially on water. This can be, has been proven many times. So she touched, holy water, and then basically purified her body through mantra, achamana, and then absorbed herself in meditation. And in the next verse, I wouldn't want to make too many spoilers, but it's going to get intense. Okay, so maybe there are some questions or comments. Er war schneller. Ich glaube, Balaram Prana gibt dir gleich ein Mikrofon. Huh? Oder sag's einfach und ich wiederhole es für die.
Hello? Hare Krishna. It's more like a kind of a technical question. You mentioned that besides Krishna, other personalities are called as Bhagavan. What I know from my experience, or what was my speculation basically, was that other persons, like for example the Baudhayana Sutra, they call Baudhayana as Bhagavan, but they say Bhagavan Baudhayana. So, or they say Bhagavan Vyasadeva. But when they say Krishna, they just say Bhagavan. Is this a correct observation, or is this just...
No, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni and Shiva are addressed as Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. The first time I read it, I was thinking, oh, Krishna is going to speak in the middle of this text somehow. Yeah. We're talking like... but no, so in the Bhagavatam, it's just Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, just like in the Bhagavad Gita. And the reason is because there is Bhagavan and there is Sevaka Bhagavan. So the spiritual master can actually and should be worshipped just like Bhagavan. You know? So therefore he is Bhagavan. You know? But he's Sevaka Bhagavan. You know? So in some places, Prabhupada explains also, you can address him as Bhagavan, but technically he's Sevaka Bhagavan. And ultimately, of course, only Krishna is Adipurusha. Govinda Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. He is Adipurusha, the supreme enjoyer, and even Vishnu Tattvas, like all the different Vishnu Tattvas, Narayana and Shiva, they are Sevaka Bhagavan. But they're Bhagavan. Yes. It's okay? Björn.
So I have two questions, and the first is related to the lecture, and the second one maybe I can ask later. And the first one is, what if the combination of the Bhagavatam is the 10th canto? What about the 11th and 12th canto? What is it about?
So the Srimad Bhagavatam is made of 12 portions, 12 sections, 12 skandhas, or cantos in English. And the first two cantos are considered to be the feet of Vishnu, of Krishna. And then progressively, the cantos, until the 9th canto, are to his neck. And then the 10th canto is his smiling face. So it means the essence, you identify a person by its face, by its smile. So the most important part of the Bhagavatam is the 10th canto, and also the 10th canto is the biggest. I think, if I remember correctly, it's 90 chapters in the 10th canto, and I forget how many chapters in the rest of the Bhagavatam. But the biggest portion of the Bhagavatam is actually the 10th canto. And then, of course, there is the 11th canto and 12th canto. The 10th canto especially deals with deity worship. Arka Vigraha Seva, the worship in the temple and the rules of regulations and surrounding Pancharatrika Seva in the temple. And the 12th canto is prophetic. Many prophecies about Kali Yuga are there. There are some other topics as well, but these are, you could say, the topics that show directly. And I don't know if it is Shastra, but I think I heard that the 10th canto is 11th canto is the crown of Krishna, and the 12th canto is the feather of Krishna. But, we have to look it up if it is true. 1/3 of the Bhagavatam. 1/3 of the Bhagavatam, so it means 180 chapters in the rest of the Bhagavatam, 90 in the 10th canto, more or less. Yeah. And the second question, or any other question? Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you please explain how the ego and bhakti is connected? Because you said kill ego means you're killing somewhere in bhakti also.
Yes.
So can you please explain how both are connected with each other?
Yeah, so false ego, it's very simple actually. False ego is lust. It means selfish. You want to take something. And sometimes it's very horrible. You can kill somebody, or you steal something, from somebody. And the opposite, of course, is love. So love is selfless. So when people, the logo of McDonald's is "I'm loving it," it's not love. It's a misnomer, because it's called fish love. It's like you have a pan, you have a dead fish there, and you thought, I love fish. I don't think the fish is feeling loved so much, The fish is, dead. So this is material ego is like that. You are enjoying, somebody else is suffering. On the cost of somebody else. So this is false ego. And real ego is love, when it's reciprocatory, when it's pure, when it's selfless. It's divine, bhakti, devotion. And of course there are 9 limbs of bhakti yoga: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Sakyam, Dasyam, Atmanivedanam. So these are the 9 limbs of bhakti. So when you practice those limbs of bhakti yoga, then the real ego becomes more and more predominant. When you go to a temple, when you sing kirtan, when you smell the fragrance of the temple, you see the lamp in the temple, you hear the bells, you hear the sounds, you embrace and touch the devotee. So when the senses become completely involved in spiritual activities, the real ego becomes more and more manifest. And you have this sensation of bhakti. Bhakti means selfless, completely selfless, ready to sacrifice. Not counting and making a plan. How I'm going to get the best out of the situation. This is material ego. Spiritual ego, bhakti means it's like the gopis. They risked everything to join the rasa dance of Krishna. So this is considered to be even they were not learned, scholars, but they had a natural urge. So bhakti is simple for the simple and complicated for the complicated, it says. So some people have to, and once it happened to me, we had a guest in the temple in Berlin, and he was asking me so many questions, and I was explaining all these questions for 1 hour. And after 1 hour, we reached the point, yes, you should chant Hare Krishna. But it was really through question and answer, it took so long, that we reached this very clear conclusion. But it could be very simple, So, like that, Sometimes you need to understand philosophically why and how, until you reach the point to be, very simple. Genius is simple. If it's too complicated, it's not genius. Like a short slogan, Sometimes there are some genius ideas. They're very simple, very pregnant, Just an apple, as a logo. Everybody recognizes it now. Okay. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.